Science writing. How similar or different is it with other forms of writing? The best way to understand the concept is to compare and contrast this with something else. In this video, we are going to compare science writing with other writing genres. What comes first in your mind when you think about science writing? Do you think about Isaac Asimov's Foundation series? Or that article from Popular Science about a 125-year dinosaur dandruff? What about a journal article titled Biopharmaceuticals and Nutraceuticals from Rice Grain, Exploiting the Endosperm Germ Bran for High-Value Innovation Rice Byproducts? Now, that's a mouthful. But all these writings are called science writing. Science writing may take two forms. 1. Writing about science or popular science writing. Or 2. Writing in the context of science or scientific writing. These two kinds of science writing can be traced from the development of science as a discipline. Back in the 1700s, science as a method and as a way to explain the world was not yet clear. Think of Benjamin Franklin being a scientist, philosopher, and politician all at the same time. Thus, the kind of writing that scientists did during this time was not as distinct as other forms of writing. Then, in the middle to the late 1800s, scientific institutions such as the Royal Academy of London started to professionalize the discipline. This created the specialized areas of study such as biology, chemistry, and physics. These scientists also started organizing themselves, so they needed to communicate with each other better. As a result, science writing became more specialized and structured. This paved the way towards scientific writing, that is, writing in the context of science. As scientists began communicating among themselves, they began to use a language and style that could only be understood by the scientists who belonged in the same discipline. In fact, even chemists cannot understand the writings of a physicist sometimes. If these scientists cannot understand each other, where does that leave the non-scientist? Thus, the need to communicate science to the public in a simple and understandable way. This is why writing about science or science writing came about. Now that you know the history of science writing and its two forms, let's take a break. Try to identify whether this is writing about science or writing in the context of science, just by their titles. Ready? First, Protein Measurement with the Folin Phenol Reagent by Oliver H. Lowry, Nheru J. Rosenbrough, A. Lewis Parr, and R. J. Randall. You've guessed it! This is an example of scientific writing or writing in the context of science. This paper was published in the Journal of Biological Chemistry in 1951. A little fun fact. This is the most cited paper of all time with over 180,000 citations by 1987. Next one. Volcano decides eruptions are boring. Tries sliding into the sea instead, by Neil V. Patel. This is obvious and really a giveaway. This is a news story about the eventual collapse of Mount Etna into the Ionian Sea, published by Popular Science, a leading science website. Notice how the writer personified the volcano, making it seem like a human being on the verge of a nervous breakdown. This is a technique by science writers to make the subject of science relatable, highlighting a sense of the familiar to the audience. Great job! I hope you got both of them correctly. Now that you know what science writing is, let's take a look at the different writing genres we can compare and contrast science writing to. The first is creative writing, which is writing that aims to tell a story or to express the artfulness of the writer. It may be divided into fiction, which are products of the imagination, or non-fiction, which are based on real events or persons. Another writing genre we can compare science writing to is business writing or professional writing. This kind of writing is mainly done in a workplace setting, such as business letters, proposals, and application packages. The third genre of writing we can use for comparison is journalism. Journalism are written accounts of true events that is of interest to a large group of people. These are the stories you read about in the newspapers or hear over the television or radio. To compare one from another, let's take a look at some parameters. After all, one cannot compare apples and oranges unless you go by their color, shape, or taste. This brings us to the three ways we can differentiate science writing from the three other genres: language, style, and structure. All three depend on the type of audience or purpose each type of writing has. Language means the words one chooses to use to achieve their purpose. In scientific writing, you can use highly technical words. That's because you expect the readers to be fellow scientists like you. This kind of technical language is avoided by creative writing, business or professional writing, and journalistic writing, which are written with non-scientists in mind. Also, unlike science writing, which chooses formal words, business writing employs you-centered language because its purpose is to get someone to do something. Thus, the language is personable, not too formal or informal. Another point of comparison that is related to language is that of style. Perhaps, the best way to explain style is to compare it with fashion. Look at Audrey Hepburn's style. You can see that she has a simple and chic style compared to Lady Gaga, who has a flamboyant style. Style in writing refers to how you present a subject matter according to your purpose. Instead of clothes, you use the length of sentences or the point of view or the tone of your words. Because scientific writing aims to communicate the results of science, it has to be clear and concise. The emphasis is on the scientific process or results, so the tone is objective and highly impersonal. That is why it avoids the first-person pronoun I. The personality of the scientist is not important, but the scientific results are. Science writing shares the same characteristics with journalism, which is also objective and concise. Both aim to be readable. Thus, they use fewer words and shorter sentences. Creative writing, on the other hand, focuses on literariness so it can be quite long and uses descriptive details that evoke emotions. The same is true with business writing, whose style is highly persuasive. We've already compared language and style among these four genres. Next is that of structure. What's our aim in scientific writing again? It is to communicate scientific results with the hope that other scientists can replicate your findings or to build on the knowledge you have generated. That is why it is structured in an approach called IMRD. IMRD stands for Introduction, Methods, Results, and Discussion. The introduction shows the gap in the knowledge that your research is trying to address. Next is the method section, which concentrates on how you conducted the study and answered the research question. The results section shows what you have found out, and the discussion contextualizes the results in light with previous research. It also discusses what you recommend for future research. Unlike the journal article, journalistic writing goes straight to the heart of the matter. It begins with the lead to hook the reader and then proceeds to provide you with details according to how important they are. Thus, unlike scientific writing that provides context first, journalism provides context last. Business writing, on the other hand, provides a structure that will make sure that the reader acts according to the writer's intention. That is why it uses a structure called the golden circle. It starts with why you are writing, how this came about, and what the writer needs to do. Thus, scientific writing is similar to business writing. Speaking of circles, let's circle back to what we have learned so far. We have found out how science writing can have two forms. One, popular science writing, or writing about science. And two, scientific writing, which is writing in the context of science. Then, we tried to trace the history why there are two forms of science writing. Next, we tried to compare and contrast science writing with other forms of writing, such as creative writing, business or professional writing, and journalism. We used language, style, and structure to compare and contrast them. Always remember, though, that language, style, and structure depends on who you are writing for or the audience and what your purpose is. The challenge now is how to create science writing that achieves its aim, the generation of new knowledge that could perhaps solve the problems in this world. And as you can see, we have lots of problems to solve. The United Nations Development Program conducted a study on the multi-dimensions of poverty, as defined by 10 indicators which comprise the Global Multidimensional Poverty Index. The index shows that global poverty is generally influenced by problems related to health, education, and living standards. Atkinson, in a study published by the market research firm IPSOS Mori, cites 10 megatrends that are reshaping the world. One of these trends points to a world that is getting both healthier and sicker. For instance, while the global life expectancy is rising, there are uncertainties that also arise from the trend. First, how do our healthcare systems cope with an aging population? Second, lifestyle choices paint a world where there is an emerging trend of death because of obesity. Third, climate change is being felt everywhere. About 70% globally agree that there is evidence of the Earth getting warmer. As you can see, climate change can only be solved if every country in the world agrees to cooperate. While science writing may not solve all of the world's problems, it gives us a chance to understand and discover how they can be potentially solved. As students, this is a call to action for us. Let's train ourselves to be comfortable reading more complex forms of writing that may just contain the keys to ensuring our own survival.